evening to members of the panel, our featured speaker and facilitator this evening, Ms. Kelly McFarlane, as well as our very hardworking youth officer, Senator Ndala Young, as well as our public relations officer, social media officer. Good evening, everyone. We have identified this evening's program, which will be very professionally facilitated by Ms. McFarlane, to be one that is critical. As you know, the Center for Disease Control in the United States would have identified that persons who are at home and who are isolated from persons during this time would experience psychological effects as a result. And so we have identified this evening's forum as being very critical and important at this time.
So moving on, we will go on to our feature speaker, who is Miss McFarlane, who is a clinical and organizational psychologist who will be doing a presentation on the psychological impacts of COVID-19 and how we as young people can cope with this pandemic.
Good evening.
Evening.
Shall I go ahead and share my screen?
Yes, you can.
All right, let's do that. Nice. Good.
Yes,
Okay, so it's my pleasure to chat with you today about, to have some dialogue rather, because I hope it's a back and forth, about mental health issues during a crisis such as this one. As we just heard, definitely the World Health Organization and other organizations have identified that mental health is a thing that is challenged. Now, we always say there's no health without mental health. So your physical health is directly affected by your mental health and vice versa, your immune system and everything. So before we go into what people should do, what youth should do to protect themselves at this time, to protect their mental health or to boost their psychological resilience, let me just step back a bit and help you understand why this even matters. A lot of people don't realize the impact of mental health problems or the impact of mental illness on society globally, actually. And 1 in 4, actually, 25% of the population will experience a mental health problem in any given year, right? If we have, let's say, about 1 million people in Trinidad and Tobago, 1 point something million. So that tells us how many thousands, tens of thousands people are walking around yearly with issues that a lot of them don't even know that what they're experiencing is due to something mental health related, and thus they won't get help. For example, the Ministry of Health in a newspaper article had said that in 2018 alone, we had more than 4,000 people who were officially assessed to be mentally unstable. And those were new cases. So those were 2018 cases, according to the report, right? And only 27% of those people had a fair knowledge of signs and symptoms of mental health problems. So they could not have, they probably could not have known to nip things in the bud, right? Trinidad and Tobago has the 3rd highest rate in the Caribbean for mental illness and the 3rd highest rate for suicide. So we know something is happening. When things like what we're going through now, big stressors and traumas occur, these things can be exacerbated. So reasons why we should focus. Mental health problems have a greater impact on people's ability to work than any other group of disorders. And as I explain some of these signs and symptoms, some of the things that happen when our mental health is challenged, you will understand why, because there's a cognitive aspect to it, and of course, an emotional and physical aspect to mental health issues. And finally, mental health problems affect the productivity of people affected by impairing their ability to function at full capacity, and hence the point above it, right? So I always tell people, warn people, encourage people that mental illness is preventable. The thing about it is we may have a mental health problem, and if not taken care of or attended to, it can turn into a mental illness, which can then be chronic. So we try to get on top of it before it gets too bad. And I will get into that a little bit in a bit. So we're speaking about a particular subgroup of the population. And so the importance of addressing mental health problems with young people is pretty much what it's associated with. So it's associated with suicide, substance use. A lot of people use drugs and alcohol to cope, especially when they don't realize that it's a mental health problem that they're experiencing and that there are other ways to deal with it. They default to some sort of, let's take a drink, an inability to live independently, needing someone to take care of them because of the mental health struggle that has occurred, legal troubles, because the capacity or the ability to make good choices is a little affected. School dropouts, economic hardship because it's hard to get work when some of these functions are uh, 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 at risk, and physical health problems. So only 1 in 5 people get treatment from a mental health provider with special training to work with clinical illnesses. So a lot of people get help from the partner by the bar, or somebody who's not who calls themselves a counselor but isn't necessarily trained to deal with mental illnesses, and so it may not be sufficient. Now that is if it's something more severe. Of course, talking things through with friends is great, but we need to know when it's time to probably try to get some more help. And the untreated mental health needs affect not only the youth, the person who's experiencing it, but their families, their schools, their jobs, their work, their communities are also affected because of what they're able to, their output, and what they're struggling with, and how their interpersonal relations go. Right. So we can see then, if we look at this little pie chart, if the yellow area is everybody and the 1 in 5 is a little piece, what's going on, right? Good. So I want to, well, I can't see the live, I can't see your comments, but I just want to do a quick little poll to see what people's ideas of mental illness are. So is it that do you think that you must be on drugs to be classed as mentally ill? So you see somebody, who's high off of, let's say, cocaine or something, and their behavior makes you think, okay, that's a madman, as the word people use. Or having a mental health problem or seeing a professional, does that mean that you're out of control or weak? Is mental illness always obvious and visible? Do you believe that? You must know if somebody has a mental illness. Or once you've had an episode or get ill, mentally ill, you will never be able to live a normal life or recover. And do you believe that asking about suicide encourages it? So just put which ones you think are true, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. All right, I'll just give you 2 minutes to do that. Well, not 2 minutes, a couple seconds. And if anybody else is seeing the live, the other facilitators, you can just let me know if I can move along and what it looks like.
Right now we have one person saying 4 and another saying 3.
Okay. All right. So as people come, maybe after this is finished and they check out the video post presentation, they could chime in. But I'm going to tell you the answer. So, well, the answer is none of these are true. You don't have to be on drugs to be mentally ill. And mental illness occurs because of a range of genetic and environmental factors. Having a mental health problem or seeing a professional has nothing to do with weakness or necessarily being out of control. Yes, the out of control part can be a symptom, but that doesn't have to be the case for you to be experiencing a mental illness. Many people experience mental illnesses and you will never ever know. They will know what they feel, but you won't see it on them. Number four is also false because people with diagnosed mental illnesses are able to live normal, healthy lives. And number five is statistically incorrect because research shows that asking about suicide does not encourage it. Rather, it is what helps many people not go through with it. Nice. So let's move along. I mentioned before mental illness, and I mentioned it's a mental health problem. You might have noticed, I might have wondered what it was. Well, a mental illness is a clinical level diagnosed experience of some sort of change, negative change in behavior, thoughts, and feelings. Right? That's the stuff that really bothers you or affects you in many aspects of your life, not just one. So at work, it affects you. At home, it affects you. In your personal relationships, it affects you. Your friendships, everywhere, the same thing, whether it's anxiety, depression, psychosis, whatever, it affects you across the board. And it's significant enough to lessen the amount of input or lessen the performance in different areas, schoolwork, etc. On the other hand, a mental health problem is quite often a symptom of a mental illness, or it is a similar experience or somebody with a mental illness, a particular mental illness will experience, but it is usually short-lived and it is not pervasive throughout every aspect of your life, right? So for instance, some grief for a while could be a mental health problem. Feeling anxious just before a job interview can be a mental health problem. But normally, as you get into the interview and you start to talk, your anxiety might start to subside a bit. At least when you leave the interview, you won't be anxious anymore. If you carry that anxiety throughout the week because of that one interview, or everything that you try to do, you feel anxiety, we might be looking at something a little more serious than a mental health problem. So that's what I mean when I talk about the two. So I always like to teach about mental health as being on a continuum. A lot of people think when we talk mental health, we're talking about people who are mentally ill. Yes, perhaps, but all of us experience mental health problems on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly, yearly basis, because life is not perfect. Now we have this COVID-19 pandemic, and probably more of us are experiencing a lot more mental health issues. So the point of, let's say, forums like these, or the point of understanding and learning about mental health problems, is to help yourself and others stay higher up that continuum. So every day something happens. You're up on top of the continuum because you woke up in a great mood. You feel good about yourself. You feel good about life, about what your plans are for the day. And then something, you face a lot of traffic. You move down a step. You get to work and the co-worker picks a fight with you. You move down a step. You get a bad review from your boss. You move down a step. So things affect our mental health issues. What affects us and how it affects us depends on who we are, what triggers us, and what our genetic makeup is, right? So the point of this is to, yes, we will walk down that continuum, but we need to find ways to come back up. We don't want to stay down there. That's when mental illness thrives. So that's my segue into how do we deal with the mental health repercussions of what is happening now, right? So I think my camera went off. The first thing about just a second. Sorry. All right. So the first thing with helping yourself is, what we want to understand is that people have different risk factors. So if you have these risk factors, you might be more likely to experience adverse mental health problems when situations like these, when crises arise. So people, now we are quarantined at home. Young people are at that stage in life where they're establishing independence and they're not children. they're getting into adulthood. Your parents may not see you as that much of an adult, but you might be quarantined with them unless you're already fully independent. Your career is now taking off and all of these things. So the quarantining now comes with a range of things that could trigger some issues for us. So one of the risk factors are if you're at home and if the parents have issues, you're more exposed to it. If you have a parent with a substance abuse disorder that affects you and the rest of the family, again, that is a risk factor for affecting your mental health. If there are people who are at home with a partner or a sibling who is hostile or bullying towards them, if you have a history of mental illness, a major stressor could trigger it. There are LGBTQ youth who experience bullying at home from their family, and now they're exposed to them more. They can't escape to their friend groups and so on. So many things put us at risk for experiencing mental health problems, and recognizing that, you can start to now look at yourself and say, okay, I need to monitor and manage, if I am at risk or if I am coping. So with that being said, there are ways to start to suspect or think that somebody might be experiencing some sort of mental health issue. So when our mental health is challenged, there are changes to the way that we think, such as you might hear the person or you yourself might become very negative. So you say negative things about yourself. I'm no good. These terrible things always happen to me. I deserve it. This is my karma, whatever. Just saying very negativistic thinking. You might have trouble concentrating if you're working from home or doing your university studies from home. Frequent negative thoughts about not just yourself, but the world. Your performance at work or school will decline, especially, of course, if you're having trouble thinking and concentrating. And even memory problems. People who are very stressed and overwhelmed and experiencing, and stress, by the way, is a mental health problem, can experience loss of memory of little things. Then there are the emotional changes that you can look out for. So something happens and you may not recognize that your reactions are bigger than they should be, but people around you may comment and tell you, or if you have someone around you can tell them, listen, this is happening. And seeming very unhappy. You can see when somebody looks very sad or worried, or you feel guilty for a lot of excessive guilt for a lot of different things. You feel very afraid or irritable or angry. And of course, feelings of helplessness and hopelessness or loneliness for people who are quarantined alone. Again, these things are the sorts of things that, let's say there was a pre-existing mental health problem. This kicks some mental health challenges into high gear. And this is where we see the suicidal ideation and all these things start to play off, right? You also have physical changes and behavioral changes. So you might find that you're getting a lot of aches and pains. Now remember, tension is a part of anxiety. So I don't know where the aches and pains coming from. It's not coronavirus causing it. Because I have no other symptoms or whatever, but I just have these neck hurts in me, my belly, my head, right? Lack of energy, sleeping too much or too little, or eating too much or too little. All of these are signs. Now, no one of these symptoms doesn't mean, mental health problem. It could be other things. It could be boredom. We eat a lot when we're bored, or right. But if you find that quite a lot of these things are happening quite a lot of the time, then it might be something that you're not dealing with. So then you have behavioral problems. This person might isolate. Yes, we're all sort of isolated physically from the rest of the world in a sense. But within your home, the person might, or you might isolate yourself from everybody. Is it very emotionally fragile, overreacting to things or outbursting in anger, throwing things, right? So even falling back to less mature behavior, suddenly somebody starts back sucking their thumb, things like that, right? All of these things are signs that something is happening mentally. People often say things like, well, I don't think this is a big, so we know we have a lot of oversharing of information, and we know that a lot of us have different views on how we should feel about quarantining and feel about being outside and feel about coronavirus and our risk to it. And we wonder why some people are so overreactive about it, or so we say, or why some people aren't thinking about it. And the fact of the matter is that we are different people, and different things impact the way we respond to crisis or respond to trauma. People who have experienced with previous stressful events can either be numb to it, or they can be very much triggered by another crisis, right? Your temperament, some people are more neurotic in that they tend to be very pessimistic and thinking that the worst would happen, or scared easily, sad easily, worried a lot. You have people who are concerned, even young people. They may be with a parent or parents, but they may not be confident in their parents' ability to take care of them or to take care of themselves. And because of that, they may feel extra stress, right? Your own risk factors in terms of if you have a underlying physical ailment that puts you at higher risk for the adverse symptoms of COVID-19, you might find that you feel a lot, that vulnerability makes you feel a lot more scared and experience more mental health issues. And these are just some of the reasons why you see a lot of people reaching out for psychosocial support. People have valid reasons to be afraid, and not everybody has the same reasons. Not everybody has the same level of social support. So a lot of people can be worried about what happens when they get out on the other side of this. Right now, so on the left hand side, these are some more risk factors. You can take a look at that. But there are also protective factors. So things like a warm, supportive relationship with parents or whoever you're quarantined with is quite helpful in your ability to bounce back and be resilient. Positive peer relationships. So you have people, you're not getting to go outside and be around people, but if you want to chat with somebody or share something with somebody, they're easily you can get them on WhatsApp or on Instagram or wherever. Right? And it's not just having supportive parents, but you perceiving that your parents are supportive. So good coping skills, an ability to articulate your feelings, all of these things are protective factors for your mental health, right? So the next poll that I have here is looking back at what we just sort of went through. What do you think has most influenced youth's mental health since the COVID-19 pandemic? And Shanika, you can let me know if there are any responses, and when I can move on, I'll just leave it up for a little bit, right? There's no right or wrong. I just want to get just to get the conversation going on what you all think. What was that?
No, I was saying, sure, no problem. I'll let you know when we get feedback.
Okay, all right. Good. So should I move on? Can I move on?
Yeah, you can move on. We'll just give you the feedback when you're finished.
Right, it will be there, and right, good, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another poll that I would have loved to hear people's feedback from, and I'll just leave it for us a little while so you can read it when you look at it and put your thoughts, right? Right, nice, good. So we've gotten all that great background. We understand why people are at higher risk for mental health problems coming out of this COVID-19. We understand what the protective factors are. We understand what mental ill health or mental health problems look like, feel like, right? Now let's get into why we're here. How do we actually protect our own mental health? What are the things that are specifically related to this pandemic that we need to be aware of and that we need to do? So the first one is step one to resilience in the face of crisis is being able to accept what is. So I tell people we are in a situation that we did not ask to be in. We did not cause it. And yes, it's pretty awful and unfair. However, we also cannot, sorry, yeah, we also cannot change the fact that it is happening. So the what ifs and the should haves are good for exploring what the situation has taught us. So I don't completely discredit that. But then we have to, at some point, let that go because it's not constructive, right? So we focus on what we actually can control, and that is surviving the present. So that's keeping yourself healthy, planning for your future if that's making you anxious, filtering what enters your mental space, and being aware of the things that trigger your anxiety and emotional discomfort, what we can actually change, and what we choose to focus on, negatives or positives, how we respond to people and situations, what we do with the resources that we have, staying inside to stay healthy. So there are things that we can control in this situation, and there are things that we can't. You may or may not recognize that worries about surviving the aftermath of or current state of the pandemic are plaguing your mind, but the consequence of those plaguing worries becomes apparent in your interaction with others, the physical symptoms of anxiety, and the terrible influence on your mood and well being. So don't let it consume you. A good way to manage this is to write down your most pressing concerns and develop a plan to deal with them if they happen. Think about what resources you have, what social supports you can enlist, and what action steps you would take to create the best outcome for you and your family. Then stop thinking about it. Right? You might want to practice redirecting your thoughts to the present and focusing on maintaining a positive mood as much as possible. Um, and just to focus a bit on protecting your mental space, as I mentioned a little while ago, this is a really important one. It's one of those things that easily moves us up and down the mental health continuum without us realizing. So in this situation that we are in right now, you should limit your exposure to the negatives. There's a lot of fatalistic and anxiety inducing fake news. So some of them fake, some of them real and unfortunate, but a lot of it is out there. And there's lots of oversharing of information. But we all need to remember that not everybody's mental strength is the same. Remember the risk factor. So this is a tip not just for you, but for the people that you love. Everybody's mental health is not the same for all those different reasons that I mentioned just now. So a flood of bad news can trigger or exacerbate an underlying or pre-existing mental health problem like anxiety or depression. So you want to be very careful about that. Um, right. So the next thing is that we want to try, while we're here in the quarantine and going through this, to cultivate positive mood states. It is absolutely normal to feel down or scared or frustrated sometimes during a crisis like this. Even without crises, our mood and well-being fluctuates day to day, as I told you about the continuum. But it is important not to maintain negative thoughts and moods because they can multiply and lead to interpersonal and personal mental health problems. So ruminating or staying focused on fears and regrets and the sad things in your life creates and maintains depression. That's what creates and maintains the problem or the illness of depression. So if fears and worries about the coronavirus are crippling, definitely give yourself a moment to work through it, yes. But it may be more helpful to consider what can be done in the event that the worst occurs rather than simply focusing on the possibility that the worst may occur, right? So share your concerns, but don't ruminate. Talking is helpful, but consistent focus on the same worries with no plan in sight can create a sense of hopelessness and frustration for both you and whoever you're speaking to. You can also try to maintain a positive mood by watching shows that you love, listening to good music, engaging in your hobbies. And one that I love that I tell everybody to do is keeping a gratitude journal. Remind yourself that this will pass, right? And I'll talk about the gratitude in a bit. So the third tip I would say is research shows that 30 minutes of walking has the same effect on the brain as the antidepressant Zoloft. 30 minutes of walking. That's how good physical activity or aerobic activity is, right? Further to that, people who engage in regular exercise, which is like about 3 times or at least 3 times a week, are 3 times less likely to become depressed again. So the remission is better when you are active. This is people who have a depressive disorder, right? Sleep is very important. Getting healthy sleep is very, very important. So that's about 7 to 8 hours per day. Now, I know that a lot of times when we're home, if we have nothing to do, we may not need as much sleep. So that we could flex on that a little bit. And the final point on this side I'd like to make is that keeping close social connections is another very important one. When we interact with people, we like um, our brain, when we interact with people that we like, our brains release a hormone that reduces stress and anxiety. So stay in touch with your friends via social media, but you can also join an online group or a charity or something to do things to cultivate positive experiences, right? So, and I want to just mention the gratitude thing again. What I like is I tell people sometimes every day. You could do this with a friend or a family member, your partner, boyfriend, girlfriend. Every day, write or exchange verbally 5 things that you're grateful for. There's always something to be grateful for, and that really, really, really enormously improves people's moods and forces us not to focus on the negatives too much. Right. So these are our basic needs, right? So Maslow, if any of you have heard of the hierarchy of needs, says that humans mental health problems come out of humans need to self-actualize, need to fulfill their best potential. And when things block that, that's when we experience mental health problems, right? So it's now for us to move up the hierarchy, we must have the one before it complete. So in order for us to have safety needs, we first need to have our physiological needs met. Then for us to have love and belonging, we may need to have our safety needs met. So this is where our focus is. At a time like this, where people's jobs are threatened, people aren't getting meals as they used to because perhaps, school feeding, or perhaps they were self-employed. This is where a lot of the stress sets in, or why a lot of the stress sets in. So as much as we can, we'll try to meet some of our physiological needs, right? Right. Another one is routine. Keep some morning, afternoon, and evening routines so that you look after your circadian rhythms, which, by the way, your brain loves. Doing this would also help to ensure that your days don't feel wasted and you don't feel unproductive and sluggish because you've just been sitting around. That certainly affects your mood negatively. You want to keep your brain awake and feel accomplished at the end of the day. So for example, when you wake up, you take your shower, you get out of your pajamas or your night clothes, have your breakfast, have set social contact times, set work or study times, set exercise time, set cooking and eating times, go to bed and wake up at the same time, right? So you have a little routine going there. You can even do free courses online. Just give your brain lots of variety, which takes me to my final point, actually. Variety and pleasure. Our brains love variety and pleasure, and it's all about keeping our brains happy so that our neurochemical activity could foster good moods and good mental health. So keep busy. Be open to learning new skills, new recipes. Everybody trying to make doubles now. I think they're trying to make KFC, I've seen recently. So do that. Join book clubs if you like reading. Read your old books, your new books, and so on. Just find things that would give you variety, that are pleasurable to you, and put those into your routine. If you're working from home, maybe try organizing a buddy system. And have virtual coffee meetings, have your virtual Friday night lines, but you're doing everything online. We have all of these this technology to help us do those things. When the coup happened in 1990, oh God, sorry, when the coup happened, those things didn't exist and people survived. We have those things now, so use those things to still stay connected and still feel some semblance of normalcy. There's nothing wrong with binge watching some TV or listening to the radio or a podcast once it makes you feel better than you did. Good. So to end, let me just say that if you feel like you need help, you need some extra psychological help, don't be ashamed to ask for it. And I think I meant to talk to you about stigma, but it slipped me. And stigma is something that prevents a lot of people from getting help. And we facilitate stigma by the language that we use. I remember in the first slide also I mentioned mad, calling people mad and laughing at these things and sharing things with mentally ill people. These things are barriers to care. And when people are afraid to go for care, things get worse. So don't be ashamed to ask for help. In any event, if you're asking a mental health professional for help, it's completely confidential. It should be. Talk to a loved one or use a free hotline. And I have some here, right? So if there are instances of child abuse, call Childline. If there is domestic violence, there's a number for that as well. And if you feel suicidal, call Lifeline or engage a psychologist who is doing web therapy, because you're not supposed to be going anywhere right now. So this is the last poll as I come to the end. I'll just leave that for a couple of seconds. Ready? And so just to round up, or summarize rather, coping with COVID or surviving COVID-19, we want to identify whether we are experiencing a problem or a loved one is experiencing a problem. Because when we learn about these things, when we get this information and this education, it's not for ourselves only, it's for us to impact and influence our community, our society. We want to see a healthier Trinidad and Tobago. That's why I do this. That's why we are sitting here. Identify the needs of you or that person. And if you're dealing with another youth that is not yourself, ask people what they need. Don't just assume. Give them the options that you've learned about, or you use some coping strategies, whatever works for you. If you need extra help, enlist that support and seek further. Enlist support from your social network, whether it's your friends or your family. And if you need anything further, there are the numbers that I just put on the screen, right? I think that brings us to the end. Yes, it does. Good.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. McFarlane, for such an educational and detailed presentation. I'm certain that it was well received by our viewers. So now we'll be opening up the floor for questions. So if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section and we will answer them.
If I can get my camera back on it. It's on my phone and it's kind of started acting up. And this live, this live would be available afterwards for people to view, would it?
Yes, on Facebook.
Yes, it would be.
Right. Well, I suppose as more and more people look at it in their own time, they can always write or comment questions,
Yeah. Okay, so we have a question from Kobe Sandy, and he asked, as a student where there is a lot of uncertainty about examinations, what do you recommend for us to cope with that uncertainty and anxiety?
Okay, sure, right. So, um, you already know the specific thing that's creating the problem for you, what it is you're worried about. What are your options? First of all, consider what your options are in terms of preparing for exams. So a lot of people, I remember I was talking to somebody recently about this. A lot of people, yes, they have some resources that teachers are giving them and so on, but then there are people who don't have a study area within their home because they, or they don't have much access to the internet and all of these different things. So it can be quite worrying and stressful. I think one of the best things for the worst case scenario is to find out what the syllabus is, or find out, sort of go over their past papers in the newspaper, and do so much of it do so much of it that you feel prepared. So the issue being worrying about being prepared. What can you do to prepare yourself, right? So that's what you kind of want to focus on in terms of um, those things affecting your mental health. Plan for the future. Make yourself comfortable with what resources would help you get through that issue, and then sort of set it to the side.
And we have a next one from Khadija Blake. She asks, how does one deal with the fear of society not returning to normal after the pandemic?
Right. So that's one of the thing about it is that we don't know that society would not return to normal. We don't know that it will, but we don't know that it won't. So the things that we can control what we focus on. So if we focus on society not returning to normal, which is an unknown, it's not going to help us. What about society not returning to normal precisely affects you? Because that's very broad. So is it that society doesn't return to normal and I can't get a job? Right? If it is that, then okay, let's say worst case scenario happens. What do I do if I don't get a job? Are there any support networks that I can access? Is there any other way that I can make money? Start thinking proactively. What would I do if the worst thing happens? So every day, so normal is a flexible complex in terms of how things are. Things change every day. They say the only constant is change. We have to be prepared to adapt. We have to be resilient and be ready for all sorts of changes and new normals. That's why new normal is a term, right? It's a thing. So what about normal? Because your normal for society might be different from somebody else's. What about that normal scares or threatens you the most? Write that down. It helps to write those things down. And for each tip, each item that you list that is stressing you, that is scaring you, right? Okay, worst case, this happens. This is what I'm going to do. This is who I'm going to reach out to. This is how I'm going to survive it. That helps us learn how to adapt and build resilience.
Ms. McFarlane, I have a question for you actually.
Sure.
I wanted to find out if this was something that you always wanted to do, or if you kind of switched career paths.
Okay. I would say that I've always been interested in. Sorry, I'm just distracted by this camera problem. Right. I'll say that I've always been interested in, why people do the things they do. Why are people different? Let's say as a younger person, why are people so different? How come people's personalities? Why does this person behave this way and that person behave that way? And even now I still do it. People tell me that I'm a person that would kind of like stare and observe new people around me, because I am genuinely intrigued by personalities and behaviors. So I knew that much, but I think as I got older and I started to know what you can study, or how you can get educated in that field. That's how I ended up in psychology. And then my initial interest was working with children, because I figured that, okay, if I could understand why different children do the things they do and turn out to be the adults that they are, then I can understand how to help people change the trajectory of their lives for better. And those were my big dreams. Then as I study psychology, I realized that psychology is so dynamic. They are so that why question, which is what psychologists ask all the time, that why question can happen in many different aspects of life. Yeah, we're looking at behaviors and personality at home that are different from in school, that are different from at work with your peer groups and so on. So I ended up in organizational psychology. And what really interested me was pathology, severe pathology like psychosis. Why do people hear things, see things? What is that about? How does your brain do that? Why? And that's how I ended up in clinical psychology. It's just I just love it now, but I didn't necessarily have a dream as a child. When you say I want to be a fireman or policeman, I just knew that I was interested in people. And I think my dad helped me zone in on what I wanted to do at university, and based on my interest, that's how I ended up in psychology.
I just had one quick question. I don't know if I can put it on
Okay.
before we wrap up. Am I live? Hello?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
Okay, good. I was just wondering, in terms of the elderly um, citizens at home, they are obviously worried with, particularly those that may have underlying health conditions. Is there any particular advice you would give to that particular population, that those older folks who may already have underlying comorbidities and may be very worried about COVID?
Sure. No, you see, the thing that makes people, quite frankly, the thing about COVID-19 is that there are particular measures in place to help us not contract the disease. Um, so your fear and your worry, your anxiety, all your mental health problems are stemming from contracting the disease. But the Ministry of Health and so on are telling us if we stay away from other people and we are confined to our homes and so on, we're very, very unlikely to contract the disease, right? So what happens then is if we put things in place, if we operate in a way that would keep us safe from the disease, then there won't be that worry will be lessened. So if you live with a lot of people, or you have to go out often to and expose yourself, then yes, I can understand you being very worried. But that's because you're doing the thing that gets you the disease. So the first thing would be to, if possible, really stay quarantined. And I mean, the Ministry of Health, the Prime Minister, they've been begging us to do that. Like they're telling you, listen, the only way is the only way. And I do understand that there are some elderly people who live with other people and they have to eat, and they have to get their groceries and so on. But take the strictest measures so that you feel more comforted. When you get your goods, spray them with your groceries, sorry, spray them with your sanitizers, wash them with soap. I think CNN or one of them was saying, you could wash the jars and stuff with soap water, and do all the things that will keep you safe, your family keeping you safe, by taking the measures that the government has asked us to take. The only way to battle that anxiety is to actually be active in keeping yourself safe.
Okay, we actually have another question from on Facebook from Selena Mohammed. She asked, what advice do you have for those persons who may have difficulty or experience fear with respect to admitting that they may have a mental health problem?
Well, my advice would be to get a not get well find a professional, a mental health professional, a psychologist. If you Well, you won't get a referral if you don't tell anybody. But there is the TTAP website, Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists. I think it's psychology.org.tt. I think it is. I will look for the link just now. But if you go through the list, you would find psychologists, find one who specializes in the issue that you're having, whether it's something clinical, grief, whatever it is, and contact them privately. You don't have to tell them your name. You don't have to give them any of that information. Have a chat with them on the phone. Feel them out. See if you like them, and when you see, especially I can speak for clinical psychology, one of our ethical guidelines that we hold very true to is to be confidential. Client therapist confidentiality. Many psychologists would or should give you a confidentiality contract so that whatever you talk to that therapist about, you don't have to worry about somebody else knowing. Now, what's even better about this time that we're in now is that if you're really scared and anxious about people finding out because of stigma and all of that, you don't even have to go to a therapist's office. You can sit in your bedroom or some private area and have that chat with a psychologist just via a video conferencing app, right? So you can start there by finding somebody professional and confidential, and the other issues that you have in terms of maybe talking to your family about things and so on, you work those things out in therapy.
Okay, we have one last question, and it's from the Secretary of the National Youth League,
Sure.
Jabari Jacob. What effects, if any, can psychological stresses caused by COVID-19 have on women during pregnancy?
Well, that question asks, firstly, what effects do stress have on pregnancy? Now, first of all, I can say that stress affects our immune system. Stress affects us by pains, and I know that serious distress. No, I'm not a medical doctor, and I don't specialize in let's say pregnancy and that stuff from the medical aspect. But I know that severe stress, especially if you're a high risk pregnancy, can contribute to miscarriage and so on. So stress can affect the unborn baby, and there are even studies that show that babies born to a mother that was very stressed tend to have more temperamental and neurotic personalities. So those are some just off the top of my head sort of things that could be affected by. I would say that if a mother is an expecting mother, so is experiencing a lot of stress, not just for the baby, but for themselves as well, they should try to get some sort of social support or psychological support. And if they are worried about the health of their baby, let's say they're it's an older person that's pregnant, or they are somehow at risk, they should definitely call or WhatsApp or contact their doctor in some way to find out what their actual risks are, because your OBGYN, your doctor will know what your risks are in terms of pregnancy and what complications could arise for you in particular.
Okay, thank you so much for
Very
all the answers that you gave to us.